Hey, I'm Jean-Philippe Gossart, Director of Photography on The Witcher, and you are listening to the Grow Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I'm a director and owner of BC Media Productions. And this is the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. So today we are speaking with Jean-Philippe Gossart. He is the director of photography for the Netflix hit show, The Witcher. And I know we got a lot of response on social media about this one. So there are a lot of fans out there of The Witcher, and I just saw a couple episodes today. I think it's a fantastic show. It looks so good. And we get to the bottom of how he achieves this look and how he sort of blurs the line between supernatural and that period piece of medieval times that we all know and love. So there's a lot of discussion about that in the episode. You guys are going to absolutely love this one. So I'm here with Jean-Philippe Gossart. He is the director of photography for The Witcher. And The Witcher has really become one of these quarantine hits. Like everyone's at home, everyone's in quarantine. They all need something to watch. They have fallen in love with The Witcher. And for good reason. It looks amazing. And I can't wait to talk to you about it. Jean-Philippe Gossart, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Very nice to be with you today. It's great.
So I want to start with life in quarantine. You know, how is it affecting you? I know we've been talking about it on the show a lot, but you know, it's a big part of our lives now. And a lot of productions have been shut down. And just curious, I know how it is here in Massachusetts, but what's it like for you?
Well, you know, we stopped prepping on the second season of The Witcher about a month ago. I think everyone else has stopped. Every production in the UK are on standby. Everyone really wants to go back to work. Everyone is anxious to go back to work. On the daily life here with two kids in the house, it's really busy, as you can imagine, you know.
What are you doing to stay sane?
The kids keep us pretty busy, to be honest with you. You know, it's a pretty full-on job to look after them. It's much easier to be a DP on set than looking after a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. But no, it's, you know, we trying to actually look at inspiring images and film that I loved over the years, and when we get some time to try to get the creativity, bubbling away and try to get new ideas for the future and for new projects.
So let's dive in and talk about The Witcher. The show has been getting bigger and bigger by the day. I'm seeing, on Twitter and social media, everybody's talking about it. It's a big, giant success. And notoriously with Netflix, they don't give anybody numbers. So you don't know how many people are watching. You can measure the success by checking social media, seeing if people are talking about it, and getting a next season, which The Witcher already has. So what does it feel like to be part of a huge hit like this?
Well, it's really exciting, and it's very rewarding, when friends come to you and they go, "Oh, I've looked at this show, it's really great, it's The Witcher," and you're just like, "Yeah, I've done this show, it's great, I really enjoyed it." I mean, the show had a really great fan base with the books and the video games. So it was great because the show had an audience already. Yeah. And the story is fantastic. The world is very rich. And, it was the first season. It was a quite colossal season to do because there's so many elements to set up, so much story to tell. And it's great now that people are a bit more familiar with the world to see where we can take it.
Now, when you first got this project, what were your thoughts? Because it, like you said, it already had an embedded fan base. Do you feel a sense of responsibility to those fans already where people are going to be hypercritical?
Yeah, I think you need to forget about those things because it's unnecessary pressure. I think you have to go back to create a relationship with your director and your scripts and take it one step at a time. It's like any project. If you let the pressure take over, then I think having your head in the right space to be efficient and to every stories are different. There was a certain type of visual attached to the video games, but the video games are relatively old now, so everything has moved forward. So the recipe and the ingredients that we had were different, and we did as best as we could with what we had, and kind of made our own story out of it.
I want to talk about the visual inspiration for The Witcher. And we have a question here from Yashuri Taguchi on Facebook. Wants to know, what was your inspiration for the visual style of the show? Were you taking cues from Game of Thrones, other films? What was inspiring you?
I mean, we've looked, it's difficult not to talk about Game of Thrones because we are in the same sort of fantasy world. I mean, there is possibly more magic to The Witcher. It's a different fantasy or type of fantasy. But visually, we got inspired by films like Macbeth from Justin Kurzel, Snow White from Rupert Sanders. We've looked back at films like Fantastic Beasts, at the world of Guillermo del Toro, which is very rich, the darkness and the energy of films like Children of Men. I think you take a little bit of inspiration from lots of different boxes, and you see how you're going to mix them all together. And each episode has a different sort of pace and storyline, So you kind of readapt it and find it all the way through.
Did you feel as though you had to stick to a certain aesthetic? Because there already was an established book series. There was the video game. Were there any things that you had to take from those, assets while you're developing the look for the show?
There is a certain style of images that are in those shows, your big, beautiful shaft of light, your smoky environment, your darkly lit cave, and your flame set, your candlelit set. There is automatically something that you're going to play with. And after you decide what's going to be your element of contrast, that you're going to use color. Color contrast was an interesting way to play in some of the set. The danger, I think, sometimes with those shows is they can become a little bit monochromatic in some of the interior, and I think that's something we've tried to balance it out because you end up with your blacks, your browns, your pretty dark set all the time. So it's how do you get some element of colors into it? How do you create a palette that kind of belong to the word or belong to each story as a bit of a different palette? Some episode we travel to completely different location within a minute in the episode, and you go from super high punchy colors from the desert to like super desaturated dark streets. It's creating a journey, I think, more than taking a formula completely established. I mean, you completely readapt the look to the story and to the location that you don't have to use.
Have you ever created medieval worlds in your work before?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of touched it a little bit on other TV series. Like did it a little bit in The White Queen. I did it a little bit in Beowulf. I definitely touched the fantasy through doing second unit with Fantastic Beasts, which was giving me like an interesting, knowledge about what we can do with visual effects and how we can push them and how we create creatures and how you integrate the visual effects world to the stunt world and how far we can push the sequences. And all my work in second unit's been incredibly useful on The Witcher.
Why is that?
So it's, second unit is, your work is very driven by visual effects and by stunts. And there's a big part of that in The Witcher. So it was giving us the possibility to see how visually we could push the sequences and push the magic a little bit, push the sequence into something that's a bit different,
I love the idea of directors of photography having second unit experience? Because I feel like I feel like that experience informs so much how you shoot your actors and your primary talent and all of that stuff. Like having that experience is so important. And I love it when I talk to guys that have had, a lot of experience in the second unit doing that. We had the DP of the second unit for Mad Max on a while back when the new one came out a couple of years ago. He talked a lot about understanding how to shoot environments, large scale, big sweeping environments in the second unit, even more so than you would get as the primary director of photography. And in a show like The Witcher, where there's so much, especially in the opening episode, there's so much about revealing this new world where you have to have these big, wide environments and you really need to show the world you're in. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how second unit informs the way that you did that?
I mean, what's really interesting, I think there's two elements about second units. Yeah, there's definitely an element of word creation, and you understand what are the different ingredients that you need to create those images, because they don't exist in the real world. So you need a little bit of a background in Iceland, a little bit of a mountain in Scotland, another castle that you don't find in Australia. And then when you clump it all together, then you start to see the world in the front of your eyes. So there is definitely a sense that you can layer and create images and create the world through that. And second unit, as a big part of it, is shooting plates as well. So it's interesting to how to match light and time of the days and get those elements to kind of all prompt and work together. The second part that I think was really good about second unit was to learn to work with another DP and to communicate with another DP. And that is a fantastic experience, because when we started to use second unit on The Witcher, we had a very fluid communication. I got lucky to have my A-camera operator, Trentio Richmond, to step in and do some of the work for us. And it was fantastic to have him on set with us, because he knew the sequences, he knew where to go. But it was very clear to him what he had to achieve. I could communicate very clearly with him. It's second unit helps you to learn how to communicate with other DPs and what's essential and what you're looking for. And, it's a very important experience, I think. And the other thing is, film like Fantastic Beasts were great in terms of being able to turn up on really large scale sets and not to be afraid at the beginning to light rather large sets. And that was an experience that was really valuable on The Witcher, to be able to come on just something that is a bit bigger than a living room that you have to light up and to make it work. And we use a lot of fairly complicated lighting cue as well to the sequences to try to mark the different effect, or to do lighting change to kind of change the style or the feeling of a scene. Again, all those things where I got kind of familiar with them through my work in second unit in those methods.
Talk to me a little bit about creating a medieval world for The Witcher. You get the call. They say, we want you to do this show. It takes place in a medieval world. It's a very large scale. What's your first step? Do you get kind of a lump in your throat? You're like, oh, Jesus, I don't know how am I going to do this? Or what's your first step?
Well, the first thing, it's communicating with the key people, which is your production designer. Andrew Lowe was wonderful. And Andrew had a huge amount of inputs and ideas on what are our colors, what are our environment, what are the texture. And then you start to think optically. For the first season, we shot anamorphic. We were looking for a glass that was quite textured, that was a little bit dirty, that was a bit flary. One of the images that felt very textured, really kind of dirty, which sort of sounds and felt right for that period, because people were not living in any comfort. We are in a much better world nowadays than the Middle Ages were pretty rough.
Yes.
So it was an interesting element to kind of always layer with smoke and flares the images to kind of keep that sort of feeling that everything is kind of dusty and dirty and people are muddy and they've got, no one's got a perfect porcelain clear skin. Every costumes have been used and they haven't been washed for days and people have been walking through woods and we kind of layered all those elements all together. So you kind of work with your production designer, worked on colors, and we kind of work with camera optically, see where we could add another layer, work with special effect on what are the other texture that we can build into it. And kind of working all those ingredients together to try to create the world.
Well, let's talk about your choices for camera and lenses to create that kind of dirty look that you're talking about in The Witcher. First off, period piece, medieval, you want something dirty, you want something grimy. How did you make your camera selection? And what other cameras did you test also?
Well, at that time, for us to shoot anamorphic and deliver 4K for Netflix, the options in cameras were a little bit limited. So
when were you shooting this?
We shot this early last year, the year even before. So it was November 2019.
Okay.
2019? Yeah, October, November 2019. So the DXL2 felt like, the camera that was going to give us those requirements. And that became quite a natural choice. The anamorphic worked fantastically. We were really lucky with the support of Panavision and mixing C series and E series. We have some T's as well for longer lenses. We carry some spherical for visual effects needs, some primos that were actually a pretty good match with the anamorphic. I've mixed up some of the old Crystal Express as well for some location, like the Brooklyn Forest, which is pretty extreme as a look. I mean, it's so dirty and so flary. It's a little bit crazy. It was that forest that had all this. The idea is the forest is always alive. There's energy in the forest. So I use a lot of flares and mold paths into the forest that always kind of flare the images. It looks quite interesting. It's, I think, quite unique as a look for this part of the story.
What was the name of? What did you call that set?
The Brooklyn Forest. You've got in episode 4, which is the Journey of series looking for Dara. Okay.
So, what was the lens that you said? You said you were experimenting with a lens to create that look.
Yeah, we play with we've looked at what would give us the maximum flare, and the Cook Crystal Express sounded like
I've never heard of these. Oh, here it is. Cook Crystal Express Anamorphic.
They're absolutely beautiful lenses, absolutely gorgeous. I love lenses which are very dirty. They're full of dust and crap inside, and that's why you get those absolute gorgeous flares. The difficult side is those lenses, obviously, they aren't very precise, So when you look at your lens and you think you're on T4, you probably at 5.6, and when you think you're at 30 foot, you probably more at 50 feet. So for the focus pullers, it's an absolute nightmare to work with those lenses. They're really, really hard.
Why are you making it so hard for them? That's just not fair.
It's very, they're beautiful. So there's a little price to pay.
Fashion over function.
Well, sometimes it's, the way things have to be. And we had we went to shoot all the sequence in the Canary Island, and it was quite a special journey to go there. We had really tough locations with the crew will have to trek through the forest for 45 minutes to find those beautiful bits of forest and cliff that we shot through. Very little lighting that we could take with us, no electricity, but we've pulled it, and the boys were fantastic. We've got a really great team.
We actually have a question here on Instagram from Zach Moore Cinema. Wanted to know, where exactly did you shoot the forest scenes? So
the forest scene was shot in La Palma, in the Canary Island. It's nearly like a primary forest. It's completely untouched. It's giant fern, and we shot most of the project in Budapest, in Hungary. I mean, I don't think there was anywhere else in Europe where we could have found this tropical forest, really.
Yeah.
I just come back from New Zealand, and there was in the Canary Island this absolutely gorgeous primary forest, and that was very special.
Just to wrap up the camera conversation, did you test anything else, or was the Panasonic the only one that had what you needed?
No, I think it was the perfect candidate for us.
Okay.
It was the right camera, it was the right choice, and it worked really well. Something
I was noticing when I was watching this morning was, in a lot of the shots, you see like a little bit of vignetting, not a color vignette, but like a little bit of a focus vignette on the top and the bottom of the frame. And I saw that quite a bit, and I was wondering, is that a feature of the lens, or is that something that you're adding in post?
No, it's mostly a feature of the lens. I mean, the bokeh on the cinematographic lenses, you lose a little bit of focus on the edges, and like that's what happened. It's very interesting.
I love it. I think it looks amazing.
I think it looks beautiful. It looks like old plate photography to a certain extent. I mean, it's pretty interesting to see now that with modern lenses like the DNAs, for example, we're going around the loop, because we're starting with those really dirty lenses where you would lose some focus around the edges because of the anamorphic bokeh. And then we've kind of taken the technology, have kind of worked into a way to make perfect anamorphic lenses that had very little of that, or none of it for some of them. And then for example, the new lenses like the DNA are trying to recreate the element in spherical lenses. And I think, cinematography is an art form that always kind of regenerate itself. It looks at the past, and like most art form, you kind of take something from the past and recreate it and see what you can do with it and readapt it. And so it's as well the fact that we went from shooting on film where we needed sharper lenses to jumping into a digital format that's really crisp, where now we're fighting that over crispiness sometimes, and those lenses definitely help with that.
What about filtration? Are there any go-to filters you're using on that package?
No, we didn't use any front of the lens filtration apart from ND and polarizer, and probably from the top of my head, some low contrast as well.
So nothing in the front, only back of the lens filtration.
Yeah. That's the only filtration that we had on the camera. I mean, it does help enormously with especially the amount of candle and flame that we've got, because, I mean, you can find front of the lens filtration that's going to sort of help. But with the anamorphic lenses, you are in danger to get a little bit of rusting. So it was the best way was kind of to go with the back of the lens. I mean, it did work really well.
I want to talk about your lighting approach to The Witcher. And right up front, I mean, we take place at a time where there's no electricity, there's no lights. So you can't really rely on the idea of practical lights to motivate. You really only have sun and candles. How do you approach that kind of situation? I mean, what are the challenges that you faced?
it's actually not that bad. You can do beautiful things with daylight, and I think the great thing about The Witcher is you are in a magical world.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always use a bit of salt and pepper in places and kind of start to get the lights to move a little bit and kind of pick some elements that are a little bit of a cheat but can look really beautiful. So that's the beauty of it, is you can do pretty much what you want, because lighting is like music. You don't always need to justify where it's coming from.
That's interesting. I like that approach. So were there times on set where you needed to light something, or the director wanted something, and you thought, well, it is a magical world, so maybe we can just sneak in a little light here, because anything can happen in this magical world?
I mean, we've done it like in so many ways, pretty much all the time. The big episode 4, the big banquet scene, for example, you start and it's just like a big hall. Everyone is gathering. It's a bit like an Irish wedding. Everyone's eating and drinking and fighting. And then suddenly it's a bunch of people celebrating a lovely wedding that is lit by just a little bit of moonlight and candles. And but it's really key moment where you can transition into those different looks very gently. And I think if it feels right and if it feels true to a moment and support the emotion of the scene, the audience will completely go with it. I don't think the audience will question those moments.
So you don't obsess so much over the light, the realistic light source and where it would actually land in the scene. You play around with that a little bit more.
I think there is an element of it where you have, to have some realism, obviously, so there is an element where you have to be quite truthful in that way. But once you've established that reality, then you can play how you want to deform it and what you want to do with it. We've played a lot with moving lights in the Arathusa world, which is the world of the mages, and that worked really well as a way to create the sense that magic is part of the wall of the building, and that's the way the lights sort of move in that space. And it sort of worked as well, because when you look at the building from the outside, it's not really the sort of building that's got big, lovely windows that you can bring lots of light from. You have to find a different approach to it. We've played a lot with that. Definitely the beauty of working on a show like The Witcher is you can model light pretty much as you wish.
Did you work with any other cinematographers on the show?
Yes, Gavin Schroeder worked. I worked very closely with Gavin on the show. He did a beautiful work as well, and like both of us had a really great communication all the way through the series in terms of choice of lenses and lighting effect and colors, and we share sets, we share sequences, so we share episodes. We work very closely one with another.
Let's talk about the color palette of your lights, because yes, you are in a supernatural world. You can play a little bit around with different colors if you have to, but primarily you're just getting daylight and candlelight. So can you walk me through your approach to creating each one of those? And maybe we'll start with daylight.
In the daylight, I think there is a sense of where the continent is and where the different worlds are as well. If you're in the north in the continent, we've kind of tried to play a slightly more bluish, coldish, very white light, and kind of as we worked our way towards the south continent to get something that's a bit warmer and there's got a different texture to it that is more flary, is a little bit dirtier and dustier. As we move to the night, we've sort of, from memory, didn't color the night, the moon, when we shot. I've colored the moon in post-production to try to get a little bit more freedom there. It's something that I quite like to do. I mean, everybody does it slightly differently. Some people like to have strong color that they use straight on set for the moonlight. I think the moonlight could have different color depending where you are and where you're going to as well, which was a great sort of possibility to play with, and then we went really intense in some of the scenes where the flame became red and became really primary, and that was another really interesting layer to kind of start to use red as a block color in lighting, either as a way to show horrific flashback or to heighten the violence of the emotion of a scene. Like, for example, when Yennefer transforms itself, all the way through that transformation, the light starts on a kind of more classic golden at the beginning to a very intense, full-on flame red by the end of it. That is quite beautiful because she's in a complete bloodbath, really. We play the red as a shocking, another way for the very intense flashback that Ciri is living. It has been the main thing approach is trying to use the color of the light in a way where there is a certain realism to where we are in the world. We were lucky to kind of have a part of the story based in northern continent, another part of the story that she's more in southern continent. We have tropical background, so we had the possibility to kind of, mix it up. Really, we didn't have to have one rule that was going to fit them all. We totally could adapt it to the location.
Can you talk to me about the lighting package that you used?
We use a lot of LED, lots of sky panel, 360s, and I used a lot of Asteras, which were really, really useful. I love the slides. A very, very great light, very flexible, a huge amount of mold beam, a lot of VLs for lighting effect and moving lights. I use a lot of mold bars for flares. So it was a package that was that was quite extensive. We had a full HMI package, which would have been pretty large. Then I use a huge amount of LEDs everywhere on stage, complemented with some timestamp sources. And then there was, any light that was more like for lighting effect. So flicker boxes and moving light like VLs.
Yeah. Did your gaffer run all of the programmed lights, or did you have somebody on set specifically to do the programming? We
were quite lucky to. Wayne Shield is the second time that I worked with him. He's a great gaffer. And we were pretty lucky to have supportive producers to give us enough time to do decent pre-lights.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about one of the more challenging scenes that you shot on The Witcher and how you overcame those challenges?
I mean, the whole banquet sequence was really challenging because there's so many different styles to one location. You start with that banquet, you get into the tornado, and then you finish into that very calm and serene wedding.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
To do Yeah. And so it's literally, how do you build that? We've kind of worked in a way with Wayne Shield, my gaffer, to kind of pre-rig everything that will give us every single effect that we want into the stage prior. So it was a very large hall. So we created a sort of star-shaped structure with 40, 50 sky panel that will give us a really interesting chase that will be seen on the entire space. And we created those Christmas tree, which was those kind of scaffolding towers with about 20, 25 S60s sky panel that will chase and flash. And when everything was kind of queued together, the intensity of the lighting was like being in some sort of crazy nightclub, which was kind of fantastic. And it worked really well because you can really see the movement of the light, which means that when we start to add smoke and visual effects, then you understand the movement of the tornado, you understand what it does to people. And we had to look at the last part. How do we transition from that really intense moment to a very dark, moonlit room with just a few people with candles, And it was a really interesting journey that we play a lot with colors as well through that journey in the grade as a way to kind of separate the more golden evening into a very cool moonlit cold wedding.
So you pre-programmed all the scenes that you needed within that sequence in those light trees, for lack of a better word, and you basically just everything's done in the pre-light.
The only thing that you have to readapt a little bit is the speed of your chases, but that's pretty much it, like once you... the other thing is to shoot the sequences, we had a relatively limited amount of time, so... and there's a lot of people in the front of the camera in the scenes, so... you haven't got that much time to shoot at the end, so you need to be as prepped as you can be and really hit the ground.
What was your schedule like on The Witcher, your shooting schedule?
It was, from the top of my head, we were 16 or 18 days an episode, something like that.
So did you feel pressed for time, or did you feel like that?
You always do. You always do. No, you always do. I mean, I was really lucky to work with Alex Garcia Lopez, who's a very exceptional director, and he's got a lot of energy, and he brings that to the set, and he gets everyone on board with him. And we look for interesting imagery all the time, and where you have to push, and a lot of the word of The Witcher works as well through close-ups, through details. It's a mechanic. You need to understand all the different elements to be able to tell the story, and all that work is quite time-consuming. A lot of the camera approach is quite classical to a certain extent. We worked a lot of dollies and track, of cranes. So in the more drama scenes, we've kept a certain elegance, and it was, I think, really beautifully done in that way. And then the action needs coverage, or we've tried to make it really immersive by keeping the shot going a little bit longer and keeping the audience within the action all the time, we going through floors from one set to another's. We're very close to the action. The camera is flying around. We've kept it. It's one of the shows that I think needs a bit of coverage as well. You need to build those moments. You need to understand all the little details to be able to really make it work.
Talk to me a little bit about coverage. How many cameras did you have on set on average?
We run a two-camera show, but with 3 bodies all the time. So I would have always either a camera ready on the Steadicam or a camera ready on a little Ronin or on the crane. So and then on the slightly bigger sequences will be 3 to 4 cameras. When we need it. I mean, nothing exceptional. Like two cameras with a third body to get everything kind of rolling, and then as soon as you get a lot of people in the front of the lens, you just bulk up the numbers a little bit, and Or if we had tricky location, we try to get more cameras as well to help us out for access and to try to get the coverage that we need,
What maybe the challenges are when you're working with animals? I mean, you got a lot of horses on set. Do you have to make any accommodations for your gear or your crew or anything? I mean, I have a little bit of experience with animals only because I've done a bunch of commercials with dogs and raccoons, strangely enough. I've worked, never any large animal like that. But when we worked with even just, more traditional animals that you see in commercials and stuff, dogs, and I guess raccoons aren't as traditional, but when you worked with even these small animals, so much had to be done on set to accommodate this animal there. Like we had to pretty much change almost everything that we were planning on doing when we actually got the animal trainer on set because of just the rules about working with them. I mean, did you have to make any modifications like that?
I mean, it's just another layer of it belongs completely to the word, and you have to make it work. Like the horse that plays Gerald de Riviera Roach, his horse is very well trained, but everyone was very mindful to be quiet when you need to be. Those horses are incredibly well trained, and they used to be on set. They're used to work in the environment. The riders are fantastic. We never had any accident or any problems. Like our horse wrangler was really good at coming and telling us where they were going to be during the blocking and kind of making sure we're not putting equipment in places where we can't. But as a whole, I think it was pretty easy, surprisingly easy. They've got a really well-oiled machine in terms of getting those riders and horse ready in the morning. The guys that we had down there were really well informed. They knew what they were doing. They knew where to stand. They knew what to do. Henry is a fantastic rider. So he had a full control of his horse, which was really helpful because you can do, he trained a lot. He ride his horse, I think, every week when he's not shooting to keep going his relationship with the animal, and it does pay off. It wasn't the most challenging part. I think the challenge is when you start to add all the elements together, which is large crowds, animals, big visual effects, big special effects, limited time to shoot it. Then once you put all those elements together and you put that in a TV-ish schedule, then you go, okay, let's hold on. Let's go.
Did you ever hit a point where you're saying to yourself, I don't know how this is going to get done. I just don't know how I'm going to do this.
I think there's moments where you start the day and it's going to be a squeeze, but there's always way, to work around it. There's always way. I think with experience, when you're going to fail, and one of your responsibility as a DP is not to be quiet and is to say it. And if you've got a good first AD and you've got good producers, and everyone's going to listen to you, and there is way to build splinter units. There is way to pick up stuff somewhere else. There's always a way to pick up stuff that you didn't get.
Yeah.
Back in a corner of a studio against a little bit of flat with or on a plastic tree or whatever. You can always add those little elements that you couldn't get. We did a lot of that.
Really?
Every show do that. There's always a moment when your director goes into the edit and then he comes back with his little wish list. And you go, okay, let's, we're not in the Canary Island anymore, but we can make it work somewhere else, and There is, of course, there is elements which are way more complicated to get, but yeah, I'm a believer that you can cheat a lot of things, and it's very important to once your director has been in the edit to see what's missing, because you only want to make it better.
Did you have to do any pickups after the fact for this?
Very little, actually. Very, very, very little.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, we didn't do a huge amount of pickup.
Especially with a show like this, because it's not like you can rely on blowing through 3 pages with a oneer. Like, you've got action scenes, you've got a lot of coverage. You got to do what you got to do with the show like this.
I mean, the good things is, you can use doubles, and that's when you get your second unit in, and you get the doubles in, and you can totally carry on the fight scenes. There's 2 sides to the story.
Yeah.
So, we prioritize the big wide, the big establisher, make sure we establish the lighting and the movement, and then we made sure we shoot Henry and his performance as best as we can, and then if we're missing a few inserts looking the other way, then it's a little bit easier to do.
And our last couple of minutes, I want to talk about your lookup table, your relationship with your colorist, basically the color of the show. And we have a question from Twitter, Jamie Dickinson, asking, how much collaboration did you get with your colorist? Some of this looked like, quote, old masters' paintings.
Well, we had an absolute fantastic DIT called Joran Hendricks. Joran is a Bible when it gets to the red cameras. And he was incredible in terms of maintaining the equipment and being incredibly supportive as how we can do little changes. And so the way we sort of worked is we had one show lot, and then we built a lot of little CDL. That was kind of, sort of what was our need for each location or each part of the story. But the show lot was pretty standard, pretty basic. We from the top of my head, we lost a little bit of saturation. I think we didn't do a huge amount we've kind of rebalanced the color to make them feel quite pleasing to us, but we worked way harder on the CDL for each scene. For each scene, we will kind of start from scratch. And what was really important is to be able to keep track of the information to the post-production. And that's something that worked really well. And the other thing where we were really lucky is the colorist of this show, Jet Omoshebi at Goldcrest, play a massive part. She really came up with fantastic ideas, and it's a challenging show for a colorist because, there isn't one formula that works all the way through. Every episode has different needs. Every location has different needs. So that was a really tough job for Jet, and I think she did a wonderful work on it. Really, really wonderful. But the main color approach was starting and working on CDL on each scene. I liked working this way because I think it gives you more flexibility and it gives you the possibility to.
I just want to interrupt for a second to clarify CDL, color decision list, for people that we don't talk a lot about that. We haven't talked a lot about that on Go Creative Show. So just to clarify what that is, I mean, people understand what the DIT is, but what is that CDL, the color decision list? Just to explain it to people so that it makes sense.
Basically, what it is, it's like a mini grade that you do on the day that you apply on the top of your lot. And so you basically color the scene the way you kind of want it to look like when you shoot it.
Okay.
It's that simple. It's
okay.
like,
so it's something that goes on top of the show. You have your show lot, and then you have your CDL from scene to scene or shot to shot or whatever it is. And you're just keeping track of that so that when it goes back to color later on, they know what you did on set.
Correct. Absolutely. So it's a very, I think it's a really nice method to work. It does work really well. And it gives you the possibility to try stuff. You get a little bit more flexibility working that way. I think it's great.
Yeah. Henry Kalowski on Facebook wanted to know your workflow with visual effects. We have a couple minutes left. Let's just talk about that because there's quite a bit of visual effects on here. Can you just give us a little bit of a rundown on how you collaborated with visual effects on The Witcher?
I mean, the way we worked is visual effects does a breakdown of the episode, and we all sit down around the table and we all look at that breakdown, and we all usually make it bigger because we want to do more stuff, and we want bigger monsters, and we want more shot with the monsters, more shots with matte paintings, or more movement with the cameras in the matte paintings, and so we kind of develop that dialogue all the way through. And then there is a bottom line number, which is their budget. And that's the moment where we all kind of go back to your breakdown and kind of go, okay, we can't do this there, we can't do this there, or we don't do it there. And we kind of cut our cloth until we make it work within the budget that we've got. On set, we've kind of worked out the methodology of the shoot prior the time where we are on set. So we worked out why we don't use eyeline markers, people in green suits, people in whatever way we approach it. This is definitely worked out prior to it. And the thing that was great with the guys that we had is they were really good at communicating really early on the design of the creatures, which was really helpful, as how you approach it. If they're dark, you need to feel where the light is coming from, or you don't basically present them. So they were great. But most of the work with visual effects was definitely done in prep. Breaking down what we could do, what we wanted to do, and the methodology was pretty simple and classic, in the respect.
The very first scene of the very first episode is this battle with this gigantic monster with all these spider legs coming out of it. It's giant. It's in the swamp, whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, what a challenge that must have been to have to think about the shadows because of how all the legs on this thing. that was something as I was watching it, I'm like, this is just such a crazy, weird thing that you have to think about. But how do you approach something like that? In visual effects, when there's these wild monsters that don't take on normal shapes, how are you dealing with accurate shadows?
Well, shadows can be recreated in visual effects as well. So
do you have to make any accommodations for it on set? Like, are you thinking about those things? Or you just figure, I hit my mic. Are you just thinking like, they'll handle it later?
No, I think what you do is you work on references. So you work on, for example, for a creature like this one, you will have a bit of arm, a bit of legs. You'll have a little prosthetic piece that gives you a sense of what it looks like. So you're able to have a texture and a light reference. And in some cases, where you'll have a model of the creature that gives you a reference for shadow and framing. So that's something that you will have already. We always try to always have something to work from for every single creature. If it's someone in a suit, or if it's someone with a pole, but you always need something for the actors to interact with. So it's crucial. If they've got nothing to interact with, it's not going to look great.
Yeah. Well, the show, like I said, it looks amazing. You did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. And congratulations on a season 2. You must be so psyched.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. And once the virus is gone, we can go back to work and play again.
What a great day that will be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we'd love to have you back for season 2. And stay healthy.
Thank you, you too. Lovely to talk to you.
All right, I want to thank Jean-Philippe Gossart, the director of photography for The Witcher, for coming on Go Creative Show and sharing his experience. I hope you guys learned a lot. I know I did. I loved that Christmas tree lighting setup thing. I hope he gives us pictures so we can post them on the site. And that's actually a good segue to encourage you to go to our website, gocreativeshow.com, where you can find the show notes for this episode and all other episodes. I want to thank Matt Russell for mixing and mastering and making the show sound so good. You can find him at gainstructure.com and on Twitter at gainstructure. And Connor Crosby, our producer, who puts this whole thing together behind the scenes. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com, ignitionvisuals.com. Now, we encourage you, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and follow us across all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We give you an opportunity to have your questions heard, and we love your feedback. And of course, the show wouldn't be possible without our fantastic sponsors. So we want to thank them, MZ, Education for Creatives, and PostLab, Collaboration for Final Cut Pro 10 and Premiere. Please support those that support us, and we'll keep giving you these episodes week after week. See you next time on another episode of Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.